What a fabulous day it is right here, ladies and gentlemen, at Saudi Smart School Summit 2021. It's a pleasure for me to go ahead and welcome our next speaker for the day, Mr. Abdulhameed Chachi. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Well, talking about his intro, he is the Vice Principal of Al Rahib Academy. He works with the principal and the senior leadership in ensuring the budget is sustainable and ensuring the sustainability to make sure the school can run efficiently in a short term and long term. Going ahead and welcoming our next speaker on board. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Nice to meet you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today I want to speak about a topic which I feel is probably one of the most important topics, and really is the number one topic that we should be thinking about when we're part of a school leadership or being a teacher, and that is safeguarding and child protection. Now, obviously, in the online world and due to the COVID pandemic over the past a couple of years now, things have changed. And thinking about safeguarding and child protection, we've had to kind of think about different ways of ensuring child protection, because the children are not there in front of us anymore to be able to see or to monitor certain things like we used to. Now, there are four things that I intend to cover today. The first of them is, what is safeguarding and child protection? I know that in some countries or some places, safeguarding and child protection is not something that is done by all members of staff. It is generally tended to be done by the school leadership or probably by the authorities. We'll then talk about what the difference between child protection and safeguarding is inside the school, and then also what's different about distance learning and how does that affect safeguarding and child protection. Thirdly, we want to look at how should schools ensure safeguarding online. So what are practical steps that a school can do to ensure that students are safe online as well as they are in school. And then finally, talking about recognizing, reporting, and monitoring the concerns that you may have. Okay, the first thing would be to first talk about, well, what is safeguarding? And safeguarding is essentially a set of policies, procedures, and practices employed to actively prevent harm, abuse, and distress. So basically everything that we do in a school to ensure that everybody is safe, and that includes the staff, the children, the students, the teachers, the cleaners, everyone in school. So whether it be health and safety, whether it be child protection, it is the overarching concept behind keeping everybody safe within the school. Now, some of you may be aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, the most important thing that anyone would want to have is to have safety and security, even before they'd want to eat. So if we want students to be able to learn in a safe environment, that's the essential part that we need to give them first, that they feel safe, they feel confident, they feel happy, and then they're more likely to be able to engage in the learning in a better way. Now, child protection comes under safeguarding, but this is the actions and the things that we do as school leadership, as teachers, as staff within a school to ensure that children are actually being abused or suffering kind of abuse or neglect in some way. What are the actions that we take in order to take them out of that neglect or abuse? Now, in school, we have access to the children. We can see if they've been harmed in any specific way, whether it's physically. Sometimes we can monitor, how tired they are. Maybe they may have marks on their bodies. Maybe they are not eating. They're coming in hungry. There's lots of different things that we can see when they're in front of us. Now, the difference that distance learning, or the complexity that distance learning has introduced, is the fact that we no longer see the students physically. And in some cases, maybe the technology will only allow us to see that the student is online, but maybe we neither hear them or see them. So it makes it identifying any types of physical harm or psychological harm much more difficult than it would be in a physical setting. It's easier for children to be taken advantage of, neglected, or abused without anyone noticing due to these technological issues because the children are not there in front of you. There are lesser opportunities for disclosure from children. Now, those of you that are newer to child protection, a disclosure is when a child tells you that something has happened to them, or they feel unsafe, or that they're being abused or harmed or neglected in any way. And then it's the responsibility of the school, the teachers, the leaders to be able to do something about it and to help that student. The other complexity that can arise from this, now, depending on what country you're in, there are certain jurisdictions and there are certain authorities who are responsible for looking after the children or doing things about it. Now, one thing that goes out of your control is if a student is accessing the learning in a country that is outside of your jurisdiction or outside of the jurisdiction where the school is located. And that can add a layer of complexity about what you can do to support that child. Depending on the country that they're in, you would have to try and take some level of precaution. Now, excuse me. So in order to ensure that the practical steps that schools can take in order to ensure that we safeguard children online is that all staff understand the safeguarding policies and their responsibilities on monitoring and reporting. Now, in terms of monitoring, because the students are not there in front of you, it's very important that you start to use the data, and I'll go into that a little bit more in depth a little bit later on and talk about how we can use data in order to monitor the students and their well-being. It's very important for school leadership to make sure that policies and procedures are up to date and regularly reviewed. So with the changing goalposts since COVID has started, it's been a very, very different world, and the world is constantly changing. Some students are online, some students are in school, how the teachers are delivering their lessons, how counseling is done, for example, when we notice certain things, how the authorities are able to deal with these kind of things. It's very important for the leadership and our policies and procedures to be kept regularly reviewed and up to date. One of the most important things when it comes to working in schools and working with vulnerable people, such as children, is that we ensure that we recruit properly. And recruitment is one of those areas that we have to ensure that we make the background checks. We have to check references. We have to check if there have been any concerns or anything highlighted about anyone that we're putting in front of students or giving access to students. It's really important that anyone that is having access to students or any children has been fully checked, that we know exactly who they are, what they are, and if they have any criminal record, that has all been checked previously, and those people are not given access. One of the things that's very important for a school leadership to put in place to ensure that we can do this and to make sure that students who are disclosing or any things that we notice that may be of harm to a student, we need to have a confidential, central and immutable reporting system to track the concerns. Now, the confidentiality is obviously self-explanatory. Central means that, it's in one place, that I don't have files here about one student and then files in a different place about another student. It's all in one place. So then I'm able to be, or the school leadership or whoever it is that's looking after the students can see patterns within the data or within the concerns that are being raised. The immutable part means that we don't change anything. So anything that's written on this system can never, ever be changed, even if it's a mistake, because if it's changeable, then let's say, for example, somebody in leadership is taking advantage of students. That person in leadership may be able to go into these systems, change something and cover up the details. So if a teacher has given or written up something on the system, then it means that nobody within the system is able to change that, and that will remain forever. One of the main important things, again, that a school should ensure is that they have what are known as designated safeguarding leads. Now, these are the people that will lead on safeguarding and child protection within a school to ensure that all of the concerns that are logged on the system are logged and followed up. Because what can happen a lot of the time, the country that I was born and brought up in the UK, there have been many circumstances where students or children have ended up dying or being severely harmed because people missed pieces of evidence or missed something or didn't think that this was worth reporting. And at the end of the day, if you feel like something is out of the ordinary, or a child comes in a little bit too sleepy, or has a slight mark, or is using words that are probably not appropriate for age, all of these things, if you log them over a period of time, maybe you can build up a picture and see certain things that you wouldn't see just out of context. One thing again that's really important is that there are clear policies, procedures for online lessons or meetings to ensure that no problems occur. So if you are going to allow your school to be able to teach online, it's very important that there are certain safeguards put in place. So for example, not allowing students or teachers to have one-to-one meetings without it being recorded or without somebody else watching. This essentially stops the potential for a teacher or an adult to be able to take advantage of a child and, for example, asking them to meet them online separately or outside, sharing contact details, sharing pictures or whatever it may be. Basically communication that is inappropriate for a professional and a child that is under their care. So it's very important for a school to ensure their policies, procedures, and the training is put in place, as well as the technology. So the software and the technology is monitored by the school leadership. Okay, following on from that, it's very, very important for a school to ensure that they conduct regular safeguarding training and that the knowledge of the teachers is kept up to date. So as I said, since COVID has come along, there's been lots of new things that we haven't been able to think about in the past, because generally we haven't really been teaching online. Teaching online was generally reserved for higher learning, whether it be in universities or online colleges. But for students of 3 years old and above, it wasn't really something that tended to happen very often. So we need to make sure that our policies, procedures, our training keeps up to date with the latest safeguarding issues. It's very, very important to train all staff on how to log a concern in the first place. So if a child comes to a teacher or comes to an adult within the school setting and says that I have a particular concern, or somebody has abused me, or something has happened, or I don't eat at home, or I've been watching such and such a movie, or I've had access to inappropriate materials, that kind of thing needs to be logged, and needs to be logged in a particular way. So moving on to the next point, where we're talking about how to deal with the child protection, it's very important that staff understand that they need to listen. That is the most important thing when it comes to a child protection disclosure. Listen to the student, listen to the child, listen to what they have to say. Don't include your opinion about what they're saying. They may be telling the truth, they may not be telling the truth, but that particular moment in time, you do not know. So it is your job to listen and log exactly what they say. Do not give an opinion, write down what the student said. If it's not appropriate to write down as the child is disclosing, then listen carefully. Then once you've listened, you do not give your opinion, you write it down as soon as possible. You then must escalate it with a designated safeguarding lead. A designated safeguarding lead, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is the person who is responsible for following up on these things. They would then also be the person responsible for ensuring that the authorities or any other people that would be involved in child protection, whether it be child protection services, social services, the police, if it required it. These things are very important to be able to escalate to a higher power if you feel that a child is in serious or immediate danger of being harmed. Again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it's very, very important to train and assign designated safeguarding leads and deputies. So at least in a school on any given day, there must be a safeguarding lead that teachers or staff who've seen a child protection concern or have had a disclosure from a student, then they'll be able to report that and then deal with it in the correct manner. Now, again, some practical things that you can do as a school to ensure that we are able to monitor concerns whilst distance learning. And one of the things that I've written down here is follow the data. Check the attendance. Somebody who is usually, maybe 100% attendance is now only attending 50% of lessons or some attendance. maybe they are logging on and then you neither hear or see anything from them throughout the lesson. Make sure that you're monitoring their progress and attainment. See if you can spot any emerging patterns. And these are the kind of things that you need to concentrate on when you're giving training sessions for staff, that they can see a pattern, that they can see that, well, this seems to be out of kilter with what this student or what this child is normally up to. If their attendance is very low, if the child is not speaking, is refusing to switch on their camera, again, these are kind of things that can be raised as concerns. It doesn't necessarily mean that any kind of abuse or anything is happening, but all of these things, if they are logged, can hopefully, be able to show you that there is a way of being able to see these things. Now, in my school in Abu Dhabi, we have a system known as My Concern. So in the previous slide, I mentioned that the system has to be confidential. You cannot allow anybody to be able to get onto this system and see who we're talking about, because there is a possibility that there may be a concern raised about a member of staff, or it could be about somebody in the community or whatever it is, or a mum or dad. What we don't want to do is spread that information, because we don't know whether at that point in time, whether it is true or not. If it is something that involves a criminal offense, for example, then that would have to be passed on to the relevant authorities to be able to deal with. It is not up to us to do a criminal investigation. That's up to the authorities. For us, it's we have to make sure that we're logging the concerns, we're logging the data, we're not adding our opinions into it, and that we're not changing it, because what has happened, again, I'll be talking in the context of the UK, in some cases in the UK, where a teacher or a member of staff had a disclosure, they started asking leading questions. For example, it'd be like, oh, so what happened? So does your dad always do this? Or does your mum always do this? Or does your uncle always take you in the... All of these things are leading questions, and you can end up creating false memories, and that can be used against a case in a court of law. So it's very important that we only report the facts on this system. We don't give conjecture, we do not give opinions. Whatever the student has said, whatever the child has said, is logged in exactly the same way that they've said it. Now, again, it's very, very important to ensure that all staff know how to use the system to log a concern. That again goes back to the training. It's very, very important for teachers to be able to know how to use the system, and that they're able to report it, that they know the methods in order to be able to speak to a child, and how to listen, how to record, how to report, and then how to obviously eventually escalate. As I mentioned previously, ensuring that only the designated safeguarding leads can see the concerns. You have to also make sure that you have more than one designated safeguarding lead, or more than one person who has access to the high level, the concerns that are placed on this system. Now, again, it's basically for checks and balances. So if you're in a school, you likely have school leadership, like a principal, a vice principal, heads of school, heads of department, and a designated safeguarding lead doesn't need to be a principal, but it's probably a good idea to have the principal on there. And to be able to have checks and balances of different people at different levels means that if there is a safeguarding problem with, for example, a principal, then that person should be able to go up to the next level in terms of reporting, whether it be the authorities or the board of directors, for example, of a school. Now, obviously, when it comes to things like that, if you are reporting a concern about a senior member of staff, obviously it needs to be done within a way that is not going to, what's the word I'm looking for here? That we are not slandering, that it needs to be raised as a concern to somebody who would maybe be the line manager of that person. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this is true, as we said. There would need to be checks. That person that is their line manager would then be able to, involve any authorities if they needed to be involved where necessary. For example, if we go back to, we're not talking about a principal or vice principal here, something that happened at home. If there is the need to get the authorities involved, then there is the responsibility of the school leaders to ensure that that takes place. But also, rather than having multiple people being able to communicate with the authorities, it's better to have, one person who is responsible so that there's not more than one person reporting about the same incident. Excuse me. Right. Important things to remember when we're talking about safeguarding and child protection. Now, you may ask yourself, well, whose job is it anyway? And at the end of the day, safeguarding and child protection is absolutely the responsibility of every single person in the school without failure. So that includes the cleaners, the security staff, the leadership, the teachers, anybody and everybody that would come into contact with the students, whether it be in school or online, must be able to understand what it means to be safeguarding and what child protection means, how to log concerns and how to escalate concerns. Again, logging all concerns, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem at the time, log it. It may be the key to safeguarding a child in the future. You don't know how small a detail it can be, but sometimes that small detail can be the factor that means that somebody is convicted. For example, if a child is being abused or neglected, that one piece of information that you've logged could be the key to busting open a case and ensuring that justice is given to that child. Again, going back to safer recruitment, anyone that we allow to interact with students in any capacity must be fully checked, thoroughly checked. Their references must be checked. Full background and police check must be undertaken. We cannot leave it to chance. We absolutely must follow up on every single lead, every single reference. Communication is key. Now, in a school, sometimes a student or a child may come up to the teacher or the member of staff and make a disclosure. Now, things become much more difficult when we are on distance learning because the student doesn't necessarily have access or direct access to somebody that they can talk to. So what we need to do, as well as training the staff, we also need to train the children as to how they can disclose even in an online setting. Again, when we're talking about disclosures, if the student doesn't want there to be anyone else there, if a student is doing a disclosure and we're doing it online and it is on a one-to-one basis, then it must be recorded and then it must be shared with the designated safeguarding leads, because that then again may be used in evidence in a court of law, for example, and it stops anybody from being able to take advantage of a child who's giving that that disclosure, for example. The learning. So one of the things that can end up getting lost in this is we're talking about safeguarding and child protection, but we can't forget that our primary role after ensuring the safety of students is that we are there to ensure that the students get the best possible education that they can have. Our priority after safeguarding and making sure the students are safe is learning. Then I mentioned previously, it's there for everyone to have a look at their data, to monitor attendance, to monitor progress, attainment. All of these things can be indicators and can give us opportunities to understand when we need to intervene and when we need to support a child when it comes to child protection. Us as academic staff, as people who are within a school setting, we need to remember our responsibilities. It is everyone's job to ensure that children are safe, they're happy, and they're learning, whether it be in school or outside of school, online, in the streets. We should always be able to be there to support the children that are under our care. There is a term known as loco parentis, which means basically in place of the parent. So when a parent is placing their child in our care, then we are taking the responsibility of looking after and ensuring the safety of that child and making sure that they're getting the learning that they deserve. Now, there is a quotation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, "Ala kullukum ra' wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyatih," that indeed every one of you is a shepherd and every one of you is responsible for his flock. Now, I feel this quotation is very apt for inside, outside of school and in our daily lives, that actually, if you think about it, there are many situations where we are put in place of responsibility over children, over our families, over the staff that we work with if we're in leadership. And it's very important that we give each of these people that are under our responsibility their due justice. So, for example, if we are a teacher, that we are teaching to the best of our ability, that we're giving them the assessments, we're covering the topics that they may need, we're giving them the love, care, and attention. We're ensuring that the learning environment is suitable for them to be able to learn in a positive way. We, for example, in terms of learning environments, we're ensuring that failure is not seen as failure. So answering a question incorrectly means that that student has tried. It's our duty as educators to make sure that actually that's a good thing. That student, we need to praise them for trying. Because if we think about it, Einstein didn't come up with the theory of relativity in one day. He probably tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed until he came up with a working theory. And that, in terms of trying and failing, then that's the kind of thing that we need to, impart, that knowledge will come about as a part, or that failure is actually a part of learning, because we learn lessons from the things that we fail from. As long as we're learning lessons from that, then that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And I would like to end my presentation on that. And if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, I would be more than happy to answer them. I hope that you've benefited from this. I've tried to breeze through that as quickly as possible. I've certainly not done it justice. This is the kind of thing that needs, a few days, if not a week, of training for staff to be able to do this. This is just a high-level overview of child protection and safeguarding and what to do in the distance learning world. I hope that you've all benefited. And again, I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you. Okay, I've got one here. It says online classes are not about switching on the webcam and broadcasting them to students. It is about how would teachers bring in enhanced communication alongside effective collaboration, not just with students, but with parents, colleagues, school leaders, and counselors. Now, my subject is computer science. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is the proper implementation and proper usage of technology within the classroom. Now, a lot of the time, what tends to happen is that technology is not used in the correct, or not in the correct way, so to speak, but in a way that improves the learning. There are very many opportunities, very many applications that can support the learning. If you are into technology integration, there are different models of technology integration, and finding ways of using the technology in order to be able to boost the learning where you wouldn't have been able to do in a normal classroom setting, or just using a textbook. So just using a PowerPoint, for example, and just talking is not really the best use of technology. So, for example, I'm a passionate user of technology and virtual reality in learning. So one of the things that virtual reality can do is allow students to be able to experience things that you wouldn't be able to experience in the real life. So, for example, if we're talking about science experiments in a classroom, again, this can go back into safeguarding and ensuring health and safety. But in a virtual world, we can do things that we could not do in a classroom. So one of the famous experiments that we've probably all seen a video of is, a very small amount of cesium, for example, being thrown into a bowl of water, into a glass bowl of water, and then we see that glass bowl of water shattering and exploding. Now, of course, you wouldn't generally want to do that in a classroom setting, because it puts the students at danger of glass and the like happening. But in a virtual environment, you could model how throwing a kilogram into the sea, what would be the outcome of that. So giving students the opportunity to see things that they wouldn't be able to see if they did not have the technology. Okay, we have something else on here. When students are in school, they are guided and protected by technology as they learn about the online domain. How can students be safe of cyberbullying and cyber attacks while studying from home? Now, this is something that's very important, and I've had to deal with a number of these issues even just recently. Parents need to play a big part in this. And one of the things that we've implemented in our school is that we have certain webinars where we're bringing in the parents and we're showing them the type of applications, the type of social media that their children may be using, the type of material that they may be able to access. We're giving them practical tips on how to be able to control the kind of things that they're seeing, practical tips on how to communicate and how to talk about the dangers of things that they see online, but also doing the very same thing with ourselves and our teachers to be able to speak to the children, because they also need to be trained about what they can do if they see something that upsets them or something where they feel like, you know, somebody is cyberbullying them, who they can talk to, who they can report it to, which authorities that they're able to speak to, who are the people that are there to protect them, and to always make sure that they understand that they are not the ones who are the perpetrators, for example, because a lot of the time it tends to be that the perpetrator of any kind of act online tries to blame the victim. And what we want to do is make sure that they feel safe to be able to speak to us or to speak to the relevant authorities to make sure that they are kept safe online. I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure too.
Such an enlightening session. We all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being with us today.